Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to dive into another deep dive.
Excited to be here.
Today we're tackling a topic that I think is more relevant now than ever, and that's permission marketing.
Definitely a good one.
Using, of course, the fantastic book by Seth Godin, Permission Marketing.
A classic.
I don't know about you, but I feel like my inbox, every other form of digital communication is just a war zone of brands vying for my attention.
Yeah.
And it feels like the old ways of marketing just don't work anymore.
Right.
So how can businesses actually cut through all that noise and connect with us in a way that feels, I don't know, genuine and not so intrusive?
Yeah. And the thing is, this isn't actually a new problem. Like if you think back to the days of AOL, with the CDs in the mail and dial-up and all that,
Oh, yeah.
companies were spending something like $300 to acquire a single customer.
Wow.
Just think about that. That's like a down payment on a relationship.
Seriously?
Like that's how much they're willing to invest.
You really had to make it worthwhile to be a customer back then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that really highlights why this idea of permission marketing is so important.
For sure. So the old way of doing things, just kind of blasting your message out to anyone who will listen, Godin calls that interruption marketing.
Yeah.
So you're just interrupting whatever someone's doing with your message.
Right.
And we all know what that feels like, right?
Total.
Billboards as you're driving down the road, that spam folder that's overflowing, TV commercials that you immediately mute.
Yep.
It's exhausting.
It is.
And Godin actually says that we see something like 3,000 marketing messages every single day.
Oh, easily.
No wonder we've all become like expert ad avoiders.
Absolutely. And that's why this interruption marketing, it's just not as effective as it used to be.
Yeah.
It's like trying to have a meaningful conversation at a crowded party, like by shouting at the top of your lungs.
Right.
Might get some attention for a sec.
You might turn some heads.
But are you actually going to connect with anyone? Are they going to remember what you even said? Probably not. So it becomes about reach versus frequency. Would you rather have like a brief interaction with like thousands of people? Or would you rather have a handful of conversations that might actually lead to something meaningful?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really at the core of what permission marketing is all about.
It's about quality over quantity, for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's ditch the bullhorn then, right?
Please,
What's the alternative?
let's be a little more subtle.
Right. So, Godin says it's like dating.
Okay.
Would you walk up to someone in a bar and propose marriage?
Probably not a good first impression.
No. It's going to be a little strange, a little awkward.
Yeah,
And bombarding people with marketing messages is kind of like that.
right.
So permission marketing is more like dating. You're building a relationship over time.
You're showing that you respect their time and their attention.
You're trying to prove that you're worth listening to, that you have something valuable to offer, which I guess kind of boils down to trust in a way.
Absolutely. I mean, going back to your analogy, you wouldn't marry someone on the first date.
Right.
Just like you wouldn't trust a brand you just met with all your information and your money and all of that.
It's true.
Like, think about those relationships that you really trust, whether it's like your doctor or your closest friends or even those brands, right? Like, I'm thinking like Crisco or Arm & Hammer.
Yeah.
They've been around forever.
Yeah.
They've spent years, decades building that trust. It's not about some flashy campaign or some like gimmick. It's about consistently showing up, providing value, and building that foundation of trust. And that's how you earn permission.
So how do we actually measure that permission? Like, is there a scale?
Right.
Godin actually uses this really interesting term. He calls it the permission ladder.
Right.
It basically breaks down the different levels of opt-in that a brand can achieve.
I like it.
It's a really helpful way to visualize that journey from being a complete stranger to someone that a customer trusts and wants to engage with.
Right. And I think it's important to remember this isn't about manipulation. It's not about tricking people.
Right.
It's about understanding the different stages of a relationship and acting accordingly. Right.
Right. So where do we start on this ladder? What's that first rung?
It could be as simple as that first interaction, right?
Yeah.
Like you meet someone at a networking event, you hand them your business card, you have their contact info, but it's not like you're best friends now.
Right.
It's just an opening.
So how do we start climbing this ladder? Where do we go from there?
Well, Godin actually uses this phrase intravenous permission to describe the top rung, which might sound a little intense.
It does sound a little extreme.
Right. But it basically means you've reached that holy grail of marketing where your audience trusts you so much that they've given you permission to be a seamless part of their lives.
Okay, so less needles, more like
Yeah.
you're practically part of the family.
Exactly. He gives the example of like automatic refills. Think like those water cooler subscriptions or even something like a magazine subscription that it shows up in your mailbox every month
Yeah.
and you don't even think about it. You've given them that permission to just be there.
That makes sense. You're not having to constantly win them back or anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so powerful from a business perspective, right?
Yeah.
Because if you can nail that intravenous permission, it's like you've unlocked this consistent stream of revenue.
Right.
You're not constantly chasing down new customers. You're nurturing the relationships you already have.
It's like that saying, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, or something like that.
Exactly. Like you already have them. Keep them happy. Like you see this with things like, oh, I don't know, home heating oil contracts where they automatically schedule a refill based on your usage patterns.
Oh.
Or streaming services that they bill you every month and you don't even think about canceling it.
It's so true. Like those streaming services, I'm like, well, I might watch something this month, so I better not cancel.
Right. And part of that, and I think Godin points this out, is that we as consumers, we could be kind of lazy.
Oh, 100%.
Sometimes it's easier to just say yes to the automatic refill or the subscription renewal than it is to actually make a decision, even if it's a decision about something that, we supposedly care about.
It's true. Sometimes it feels easier to just let things be on autopilot. But is that always a good thing? I mean, we've all been sucked into those subscriptions we forget about.
That's the question, isn't it? Like, at what point are we giving away too much control? Because we're essentially saying, you know me, you know what I want, just handle it.
Yeah.
And in a world where companies are gathering more and more data about our preferences, it makes you wonder, are we becoming more or less in control of our choices?
It's a really interesting question. It's like that whole thing, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product.
Exactly.
But okay, let's take a step down from the top of the ladder for a second.
Okay.
Let's talk about points permission. This one, I don't know why, but it reminded me of my grandmother and her obsession with S&H green stamps.
Oh, wow. The nostalgia. I remember those.
Right. You would collect them for buying groceries and then redeem them for prizes. Godin actually compares these to like modern day frequent flyer programs. It's like they're these sophisticated point systems that are designed to, keep you hooked.
Oh, yeah. It's everywhere. Like your grocery store loyalty card, the buy 10 coffees, get one free punch card. It's all tapping into that same idea that we're more likely to be loyal. We're more likely to stick around if we feel like we're being rewarded for it.
It's like we're gaming the system, but they're also kind of gaming us.
Right.
Really?
Right. And Godin actually calls them out a little bit, saying these points programs can sometimes feel a little bit like, well, a pyramid scheme.
Oh, interesting. In what way?
Well, he's basically saying, are those frequent flyer miles actually worth anything if everyone is hoarding them and trying to cash in at the same time?
It's like this weird artificial economy.
Right. And it makes you think about the real psychology behind these reward systems.
Mhm.
Are they actually changing our behavior long term, or are we just, kind of playing a game?
Right. We get that little dopamine hit every time we earn points.
Exactly. So it's like, are we motivated by that feeling, or are we actually working towards some greater reward? It's a fascinating question.
It really is. Okay, so we've gone from that basic contact to practically being family with intravenous permission, with a little pit stop for a reward system.
Little side quest to collect those points.
Exactly. But what about that really deep level of trust, the kind that feels really personal?
Okay, yeah.
Godin calls this personal permission. And his example, which I think is really interesting, is a doctor's recommendation.
Interesting.
When you're facing a major health decision, a doctor's recommendation carries a lot of weight.
Oh, absolutely. You're trusting their expertise, their judgment, and hopefully you've built a relationship with them over time so they've earned that trust.
Exactly. So it's not something that can be bought. It can't be faked. It takes genuine effort to build that kind of rapport.
Exactly. Which makes you wonder, how does this all translate to the internet? Because that feels like a whole other beast.
Right. And Godin actually doesn't hold back. He comes right out and says, everything you know about marketing on the web is wrong.
Wow.
Bold statement. It's a big claim. But his argument is that a lot of companies are approaching the internet like it's just, I don't know, a bigger billboard or a TV channel with more commercials.
More noise, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Just blasting out these messages instead of actually, trying to build those relationships.
Right, because we've all been there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like you land on a website and there's like flashy animations and all this stuff. And you're like, okay, but what's in it for me? What is this?
100%. And if it doesn't grab me in 2 seconds, I'm gone.
Exactly. It's like
Yeah.
if it just feels like a sales pitch and not a conversation, I'm out of there.
It's like those pop-up ads you can't close fast enough.
The worst.
Hmm.
And I think that's, he kind of hits on this, that online, that novelty, it fades so quickly. So you have to give people a reason to stick around, to
Yeah.
actually, engage with what you're doing.
And to want to come back, right? Like you want to build that relationship so they keep coming back for more.
Exactly.
Which is why, and I love this about Godin's thinking, he really emphasizes that the real key online isn't about being the loudest voice or the flashiest website. It's about interaction and personalization.
It's about making people feel seen, making them
Yeah.
feel heard.
Just like in any good relationship, right?
Exactly. And he actually gives some really great examples of companies that really nailed this in those early days of the internet.
Oh, yeah. Like who?
Well, he talks about AOL.
Mm,
And, they managed to build this whole empire.
they're huge.
Right. But it wasn't just by being an internet provider. It was by understanding that their real asset was that permission they had from their users. They were managing email. They were handling billing. They were like a buying agent for stuff like long-distance phone calls. They were really tapped into people's lives in a way that felt valuable.
They were like the original gatekeepers of the internet, in a way.
In a way, yeah. And then you look at like Amazon, talk about understanding what your customer wants.
Right. They started as a bookstore, basically.
Yeah, an online bookstore. But they used all that data, all those purchase histories, to offer those personalized recommendations. It was like they were reading your mind, but in a good way.
You were like, you like that. Well, you might like this too.
Exactly. And it worked.
Yeah.
They built this loyal following, and it was all about permission.
Because they were giving you something of value in return, those recommendations.
Exactly.
So as we're like wrapping up here, I think the big question is, in a world where companies have more data than ever before,
Right. Like they know everything about us.
are we going to become more willing to give our permission?
Or less willing.
Yeah.
Right. Because it can go either way.
Yeah. Will we trust companies to use that data to curate our options, to make our lives easier? Or is it going to start to feel like, okay, this is too much. I'm giving up too much control here.
Right.
I don't know the answer. It's a little bit,
It's a little unnerving if you think about it
yeah.
too much.
But I think regardless of how it shakes out, the thing that I really took away from Godin's book is that permission marketing, it's not just a tactic. It's not just about like a marketing funnel or whatever.
No.
It's a philosophy.
It's a way of doing business.
Yeah, it's about building those relationships. It's about respect. And it's about recognizing that every interaction you have with a customer, that's an opportunity to add value, not just to add more noise.
I love that. It's about creating those win-win situations where businesses can connect with people who genuinely care about what they have to offer. And customers, they get to take back their inboxes, take back control of their attention.
It's about being more mindful, making conscious choices about who we let into our lives, digitally and otherwise.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, I think that's a good place to wrap up this deep dive on permission marketing.
Thanks for having me.
It was great to have you. And to everyone listening, we hope this gave you a lot to think about.
Think twice before you hand over that email address.
Exactly. Until next time.